Welcome, friends. Um, we're laughing over here for a reason that we'll tell you about in a minute. My name is Ann Jerome.
I'm Steve Chase.
And we are here to share with you some of our experiences of traveling in ministry as an elder and a minister. Reason we're laughing is that one of the things that really works for us traveling together is that we're both insulin dependent. Mm-hmm. So, we share with each other and vie with each other. What's your phone saying right now is your blood sugar, because we both wear continuous glucose monitors. And Steve's alarm just went off saying that he's low. So I said, eat that orange.
Which she got from me.
I said, no, it's somebody else's orange. But anyway, this is one of the things that really works for us in traveling together, especially because when you're insulin dependent, anything can happen when you're traveling. So wherever we go, it's, do you have your glucose tabs? Yeah, I've got extra for you if you need them. So we'd like to start off with some quotations. Oh, I'm sorry. Joan says it's hard to hear.
Do I need to bring this closer?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Emily. Is this better, Joan? Can you hear us better? Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. So we'd like to start out with some quotations from a wonderful book about eldering. It's called An Invitation to Quaker Eldering, with the subtitle On Being Faithful to the Ministry of Spiritual Nurture Among Friends. And one thing I love about that title, although it's long, is that it names what eldering actually is. And there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding among friends about what eldering really is. So the ministry of spiritual nurture is a really nice opening description. So here's a little quotation taken from Lloyd Lee Wilson, who is from Friendship Friends meeting in Greensboro, North Carolina. And he's speaking to a traveling minister. So he says, you don't mention whether you have a companion in the visitation you are now doing. I greatly hope you do. Your readings in Woolman's journal will affirm the valued position of companions in our history, and my own experience witnesses to the importance in so many ways of having a tender companion. That and a group of elders to which you can be accountable for your gospel labors are, to my mind, the most important parts of any public ministry. And then just a little paragraph from the authors in this chapter. One of the most visible eldering practices among liberal friends today is a minister traveling with an elder. Even though this is not the most common form of eldering, it happens more often than it did 10 to 15 years ago. While it is beyond the scope of this book to explore historical instances of ministers traveling with an elder, we do know that Elias Hicks, who lived from 1748 to 1830, traveled with an elder from his monthly meeting. We also know that traveling ministers typically had a companion with them. In addition, an elder from the visited meeting was sometimes appointed. So in this language, I, as an elder, am a traveling companion. That's one function that elders can serve. It's not the only one, but in this context, that's what's happening. So, to you.
So I wanted to tell the origin story of Ann and I having this partnership, which is it emerged 13 years ago when I was director of education here at Pendle Hill. So it's really wonderful to be doing this talk at Pendle Hill. And one of the great joys of being director of education is you get to select friends and residents. And I happened to have the clear calling to invite Ann as she applied to be a friend in residence. So I had responsibilities for her spiritual nurture while she was here as a friend in residence. And one of her responsibilities was really tending to spiritual nurture of the education program. And I was asked to come on to staff to create a 9-month program that would be online, but also short residencies called Radical Faithfulness, which would be training people and doing more than training, but really going deep is what is faith-based activism that meets the fierce urgency of now. And so it was a brand new program. And so Anne, she and I worshiped every morning together at Pendle Hill for 2 years. She and I would often eat meals together, checking in with each other. And we have probably gone around the perimeter path. I would say it's probably in the thousands. Times walking and talking. And so it was just this informal, deep spiritual companionship, but having some formal roles with each other of nurture. But then one of the walk-in talks, as I said, so I'm going to be doing this program and I have other faculty that we can, be sort of nurturing each other. But I need somebody who's sort of outside of the program, but close in, who will just help me stay grounded, avoid just talking about things I know, but where I would really tap into spirit, and be a loving presence with the other faculty since I was sort of the convening. And that was a lot of when we would go around and around the perimeter path. And also, I have a writing ministry, and Anne carefully edited my 2 Pendle Hill pamphlets for me and was just a sounding board. And when I was frantic about the words aren't coming or too many words were coming, how do I cut it down? Um, she was hugely helpful. And then while I was here, um, I had been thinking about Israel and Palestine for a lot of years, but hadn't done anything. And there was the Quaker Palestine Israel Network that the AFSC created for grassroots Quakers, had a meeting here. And as director of education, I said, do you mind if I sit in? And I did. And I was so deeply moved by the friends who had been working for decades in this area. And I got to know Syed Adshan, who was actually the first Palestinian I ever got to know. And it was part of me opening up from starting as a teenager, believing that um, that there was nothing complicated or morally questionable about political Zionism, and that Palestinians had no real grievance. It was because, and I hate to say it, but a lot of people in this country have anti-Palestinian racism. And so I believed any criticism of Israel's human rights record or the U.S. enabling of the policies there was either you were anti-Semitic or you were a self-hating Jew. And that's where I was in my teens and my 20s. And I had been privately wrestling with Zionism because of progressive Jewish friends I had saying, your view of Israel, you have to look much more close at the reality. You have to think about the non-Zionist alternatives that Judaism has always supported throughout the history, and anti-Zionist. And so that just crystallized for me. And so that's when The only Pendle Hill pamphlet on Israel-Palestine came out of that. Um, and once that came out, I started being asked to at yearly meetings, at quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, people would ask me. And that's when we started traveling together. And what's your side of the story?
Well, all that same about going around and around the path. But um, while Steve was having this epiphany about Israel Palestine, I wasn't. It wasn't on my radar. There were other things on my radar. Um, I watched this happen for him, but I was really not that educated about the whole situation. I learned a lot through Steve, but when he asked me to travel with him in the ministry of educating Quakers about the realities there, I said yes to being an elder because of wanting to support this ministry that was coming through Steve, not because I too was passionate about this project. And what I learned from that about eldering is that the the work is what we're serving. It's not me serving Steve. It's me recognizing that there is important work coming through this spiritual friend of mine and committing to be part of supporting that work. And I think that recognition is a really important part of what makes us an effective traveling pair, because we both realize that we're just humans. You know, we both have a sense of humor about who we are, but there is this work that needs to be done. And we're both here to do our own roles in supporting that work. I was thinking about if we were one body doing this work, you'd be the mouth and I'd be yeah, and I'd be, I don't really know what part of the body, but
Ears.
we're
Heart, soul, ears.
guts. I don't know.
Sometimes she gets mouthy, which has really been helpful.
Which is another part of the elder's role is, and luckily we were already friends, so there was a basis for me calling him on the carpet and him calling me on the carpet sometimes too, which I really value. I think another part of our origin story going forward is that we can change roles. Steve's been my elder for this week of my teaching for the Friends Incubator for Public Ministry. So, and because we have this history of trust and working together in the spirit, that was an easy, seamless transition.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions that we were going to address is what are some of the challenges and the joys, the fruitfulness. And it has been, you know, sort of this 10-year dance as it became more and more formal. And before I started, you know, serving in an elder role with you, is I would just feel like almost like I'm exploiting Anne because she's focusing so much and being so supportive of me and how do I give back. And Anne was always so great about sharing how this was a meaningful experience in her own spiritual journey, and it was allowing her um, to grow and identify her own gifts and support me. But it took a while for it. And I also remember, like when we went to the yearly meeting, Iowa yearly meeting conservative, the first thing they said when they invited me is, yeah, and do you travel with an elder? And I go, you betcha I do. And they got it. And so they were supporting Anne and admiring her role. They covered her expenses. And, and that was great. And there's been other times where I've had to negotiate an honorarium so I can cover Anne's expenses. And so part of what we do, I think, is sort of help, be in the tradition that some Quakers are really tied to, or if some Quakers have gotten away from that, we make the case of why it's so important. And I've really loved that.
Yep. And I think we make that case just by being and doing, you know, we just by showing up. And even if they're like, well, looking at me and why are you here? What are you doing here? We just proceed with how we do things. And, I'm sitting in the front row and I'm holding Steve while he's presenting. And then in between presentations, we're like, do you need some water? Do you need an orange? What's your blood sugar? Stuff like that. And so I hope that people get it. So that's another aspect of our ministry, is educating friends about how important this kind of spiritual companionship is.
And one of the times where I was a plenary speaker at Illinois Yearly Meeting, and was bringing a message about Israel-Palestine. I had done Radical Faithfulness a few years before that for them, and you weren't there with me then, but you were at this one. But they also asked me to do a workshop. So I did like a 2 or 3 session workshop on Quakers and nonviolent campaigns, the power of nonviolent campaigns. And so I did that. And then you did one on discernment.
Right.
There. And so that was fun because you were there for the workshop as well as there for when I talk, and I got to be there for your workshop and help out. So so it's sort of evolved into co-ministry and co-eldership over time, which has been really moving and meaningful.
On the question of challenges,
Yeah.
Traveling is challenging. And, we both have health issues that need managing when we're traveling. And I drive, Steve doesn't drive. So when we travel, we rent a car and I drive and Steve navigates, which is great. But I think one of the challenges for a minister and elder who were not as well matched in terms of those everyday needs could be that the mechanics of traveling can be challenging and can become kind of an issue, to if you just think about who you might want to travel with, there's certain people in your life that probably you're like, yeah, that'd be fun. And certain people like, well, I don't know how that would go with traveling. And I think,
but I have some of the best road trips I've ever had with you.
Yeah.
That works out great for us.
Because there are compatibilities that make that work.
Yeah.
But
when I was looking for quotes in the book on eldering, one of the things that I liked is it talked about before the ministry, during the ministry, and then after, the role that the elder plays. And you can speak to how you see it, but that has been profound. Like, when I was struggling for words with the 2 Pendle Hill pamphlets, when I'm asked to give a prepared message at a yearly meeting, plenary, or a monthly meeting, or doing some workshops, I try to do planning and I tend to like sort of over plan, but we have lots of conversations on the phone and back and forth on email as it's emerging, and you give notes and feedback about how it lands with you. Um, and then the other thing about before that I found so valuable is I get panicked before, like, oh my God, I'm going to totally blow it. Sure, other times it's been really meaningful, but this is the time I'm going to crash and burn. I'm not going to know what to do. I won't have something. Or I try to write every single word out, and I'm going to read it. And you have just calmed me down and said, yeah, go ahead and make your notes. But Steve, just when you're up there, go beyond your notes and just really go with the moment. But you handle my anxieties in a way that calm me down. And I remember the time when we were at, I think it was Iowa Conservative Yearly Meeting, um, where I had all my notes and then my computer crashed. And so I had to recreate them.
How
And,
many hours?
yeah. And and so I just did little bullet points. You just said, don't try to write the whole thing out. Just write some bullet points. And just that was helpful. And then I always have you close to the front row and you're whole, I just feel held by you. And if I get a moment of panic, I just look into Anne's eyes and then way opens every single time.
And that's where faith comes in.
Absolutely.
Because yeah, I'm an editor and yeah, I know words, and mostly my advice to you is too many words, Steve. But in those moments, for me as an elder, it's about centering down. It's about being where Cheryl just was when I woke her up to ask her if I could go in her room for something. It's just being centered in the Holy Spirit and holding that. And in my knowing that the Spirit is here with us, somehow I can convey that to Steve and calm him down. It's just in my being in that. And this is one of the things that I've really learned from eldering. It has increased my faith exponentially because I know I couldn't do that by myself. I could be sitting in the front row going, go, Steve, great job. But that wouldn't be the same as what I actually do.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what I do is create a channel
Mm-hmm.
so that the Spirit is
And
there.
you invite me back into it when I could easily just become a professor. And because for me, whatever the topic is, like right now, it's a lot on Israel, Palestine, and the apartheid free communities movement. But, I've given various kinds of ministry since 2011 that's been supported by other people on what I see is the three legs of the stool of Quakerism, which is contemplative spirituality, liberation theology, and a commitment to enact that theology in the world with faith-based activism of a variety of ways to build the beloved community, or what early Friends called the kingdom of God. And we have that in common, and how those aren't like three separate things, though a lot of Quakers say, well, I only care about this, I only care about this, I only care about this. But we see them as sort of entwined threads, and that's been really helpful because sometimes when I'm all talking about, the faith-based activism, you also encourage the voice of this comes out of contemplative spirituality, and it comes out of stories, biblical stories, and a faith tradition and the prophetic tradition, which is the sort of the narrative, liberation theology that we both care deeply about and nurturing each other. Yeah. Any other stories about you can think of before we turn it over to?
I don't think so. I think more stories will come out as we
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things is you also protect, one of the things is you protect me. It's like after I do ministry, I want to make myself available if I'm spending a weekend or a week with people, but I also need time apart. And sometimes right after I talk, you will just kind of take me aside and we just go have quiet time. And then I can re-engage with the community. And there's a lot of subtleties that that you've helped me with there.
Yeah, I think there's in eldering, there's so many roles going on at one time. There's physical care.
And you've helped
And
me out with my tech a lot.
there's that tech support. It's whatever's needed practically, but I think, and that varies for different minister elder pairs. It's different people have different needs, but the thing that is universal is holding that capital S spirit for the work. We've been talking this week in the incubator about sacred and secular and kind of the interplay between those and what distinguishes them from each other. And I think that in our modern world, when you stand up in front of a group of people and your job is to talk to them, it tends to seduce you into the secular world. Because there are aspects of that, and I don't mean you personally, I mean
but
anybody.
It's true, and I've been a college professor, so there's a way I can too easily go there rather than being a channel and a spirit-led Quaker speaking to other Quakers around the country.
Yeah, but I really didn't mean you in particular, but I mean one in that role. The secular view of the person who stands up and gives a talk is that they are the expert. They are apart from all the people who are sitting down there. They are higher, they're more knowledgeable, they're more ordained or whatever. And the elder's role is to serve as the balance for that. Because the speaking needs to happen. There needs to be communication. But the elder is the ballast that keeps that from flying away and becoming, I am the person who knows the most about this in the world. And I think there's
which I never claim. I just say I'm the person that's here. So this
is what you're gonna get. But for me, one of the things that has been most rewarding about this work that we do together, in addition to learning from you, because you're the person I know who knows the most about this topic, is that your openness to what I offer is very affirming for me. I feel respected, I feel valued. And that has helped me connect with that spiritual ballast in me in ways that I would not have been able to connect otherwise. So.
And we share our dreams a lot.
Dreams, weird mystical experiences, all that stuff. Did you want to read something before we go into question and answer?
I kind of think not. There's just one story I want to tell about how precious your role has been is while I was here as a scholar last year, I was invited to go and speak in Montclair, New Jersey. And this was like a month and a half after October 7th. 2 years ago. And so I went, and it was a huge controversy of even allowing me to talk. I was originally going to speak at a Unitarian church, and they refused to allow me to speak. And then the public library. And then there was this campaign of a petition of 400 people in the town saying allowing me to speak would be like allowing Hitler to speak at a public library. There was massive counter demonstrations. I had to have police escort in to it because they were worried that I was going to be attacked. And you couldn't come to that, but you pushed me to have somebody go with me. So I invited my friend Pamela Haynes, who held me in this highly conflictual. And then Pamela drove me back. And then that very night, I had to give a talk about my trip experiencing apartheid in Israel Palestine for New England Yearly Meeting as a Zoom. And you were my elder for that. And I was spent. and just, you're making sure I was okay in Montclair, knowing that it was going to be so hard. And then coming back and right after supper here, you being with me when I did this Zoom presentation about why it's apartheid. Yeah. And so,
intense.
yeah. So thank you for that.
Yes.
And I think, I think we've given some sense of what it is for us, but other people may have experiences they want to share. There may be questions, but just open it up to people in the room and people on Zoom if they want to share.
And if you're in the room, please come get the microphone so that the Zoom people can hear you.
Or if it's kind of crowded, I can repeat the question, or you can. Is there anybody in the room with a story or a question? Sounds like somebody from Zoom is trying.
We're working on technology.
So weird that I have an observation, but I do have an observation.
Okay. Wendy has an observation.
Well, you just,
Do you want to?
well, I can't
Okay,
say
I
it.
can repeat.
Um, I have this relationship with my elder who's here this evening. It's Joan Liversage. And I feel like Joan and I have a love story. And I feel like, in every relationship between an elder minister pair, it is a kind of love story.
Well, Steve has his own love story. His sweetheart is actually online with us here.
It's a different type of love story.
It is a different kind of love story.
Eating,
Yeah, Wendy,
Yeah.
Wendy said that an elder and minister relationship can be a kind of love story. And I think that's accurate, but there are many different kinds of love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing that
But it's funny because Barbara talks about you as, oh, your ministry wife.
Barbara is Steve's wife.
Yeah. And your daughter calls me, oh, your mom's work husband.
Right.
Yeah.
There are lots, so many different kinds of love available. It's amazing. Any other questions?
Or resonances from your own experience?
Emily.
Emily.
Can't see her, but this is Emily Savage, who's currently friend in residence here at Pendle Hill.
Yes, one of them. Yes. This is so beautiful to hear. I wondered if you could say more about what it's like to switch roles. And I don't know if you've done that before this occasion, but just curious about what that feels like and what you've learned from doing that.
You want to?
Yeah. I would say that for us, that comes pretty easily because we've served many different roles in relation to each other over these years, especially trading writing and getting feedback from each other on our writing. And so that's been very kind of back and forth reciprocal. But I think switching roles becomes easy when you have a spiritual friendship. So it's not just I am here in this slot and Steve is here in this slot, but we're doing work together. And there are lots of ways that we can do that work together. We just serve different roles at different times.
Mm-hmm. And outside of like the workshops that you've done that I've been able to be an eldering present, it's sort of new because you took on this role and you've done things with School of the Spirit. And so that's a recent thing. So I reflect a lot on what I've learned from Anne and how, how can I give back in that same way? But the other things that's really important is we travel in the ministry, but but I live in DC, she lives in Philadelphia. And so there's times I'm doing ministry and she's not there, but she and I are talking ahead of time and we're talking afterwards. And that's more of what we've done. This is sort of kind of the first time that I've sort of been around while you're playing this ministry role. But, so it's even when we don't travel, she is my elder for my work, and I'm increasingly becoming an elder for your work in the ministry. But it is such a partnership. And when I went to FMW, I had a lot of experience at Putney Friends with a ministry support committee, and they were amazing. But when I got to FMW, I was really excited hearing Kelly and Joe last night because that's brand new. I came to FMW 9 years ago and there wasn't any formal way of support. So part of our relationship has been an innovative workaround because there wasn't something available. But at this point, I've applied to, I'm in stage one of what you all were talking about last night to have my public ministry acknowledged and supported by my meeting. But the one of the clear when we have our clearness, I'm going to be talking about, well, anytime I need a traveling companion, I've already got one and you can have a lot of faith in her. And yeah. So does that okay. Kelly.
Okay.
Part of the Friends Incubator public ministry.
Hi, this is Kelly. I just have to say, listening to both of you tonight has brought so much relief over my body. Where I'm like, oh, I don't have to carry so much of it on my own, especially the story of Steve, you public speaking and having someone to like channel with. Because I also find myself in even this week where I'm in conversation, I'm trying to think, okay, what does Kelly think? Not like Paul Tillich or Parker Palmer, like, um, but I guess and I think I can speak a little bit to my own experience at FMW too, where like so Joe has been such a great elder for me on like a very deep like spiritual personal level with all their experience um uh being a friend doing this type of work serving people. And I've also really benefited from like I knew that I like working with staff that I had a lot to learn around spiritual accompaniment. And so Nikki Holland is another person in our meeting that started accompanying me on the hill. And that was Diane Randall was asked me if I had someone accompanying me, and I was like, oh, I never thought about that. And it did change the way I showed up, where I didn't feel super confident the way like I felt afraid of what I would say if someone came to me with something that felt above my experience. And having Nikki there was really really great and supportive. So my question here too is do you see uh, do people use multiple elders ever? Or like for different like ministries or different instances? Or maybe another way of thinking about this too for the group is if someone is embarking in a ministry, how should they think about finding an elder? Or what qualities would they look for?
That's a great question, Kelly. And I think it comes down to what the person as a minister feels that they will need. So I don't know. Why did you choose me?
Because you were the obvious choice. I mean, no, worshiping together every day for over 2 years, eating meals together, living here, talking about heart and soul and faith. It was, and we just got on really well, and we like some of the same dumb TV shows, which, the guilty pleasure is after, we do something at a yearly meeting, and we get back to the motel and it's like, okay, what's that competition reality show about glass blowing? Yeah, that you like. And then I'll say, but we haven't really watched an episode of Love is Blind in a while. And just letting off the things. So, but to get to your thing, when I first experienced the accompaniment is I was asked by England Yearly Meeting to give a prepared message at a plenary at annual sessions in 2011. And that was a new experience for me. And people at my meeting, Putney Friends meeting, ministry and council said, Steve, we all have a feeling that you're going to be doing a lot of this. And we want to offer, it was not in my head. We want to offer a spiritual support and accountability because you are representing our meeting. And so they set up a committee for me because I wasn't dumb enough to say, oh, I don't need that. And it was hugely helpful. And so when I gave the talk, 20 people from my meetings sat on the fencing bench behind me. And I was introduced by, you know, another great spiritual friend that I had from the meeting, who's now the general secretary of the meeting, and he introduced me, and it was great. He was my elder for that talk, and he was like 20 years younger than me, or maybe 30 years younger than me. So the eldering it has nothing to do with age, but that just it was electrifying, and I felt I don't want to do this without that. And when I came here, Putney Friends meeting wasn't here, but they said, okay, you go and you work at Pendle Hill and we are still your support committee. And so we're going to have quarterly meetings by Zoom. And then while I was here, I did the 2 Pendle Hill pamphlets, and they went over every word and talked with me about it and what resonated and didn't resonate with them. And they would check in with me. So it was with that knowledge. And then as we were becoming such close friends, it's like, oh, well, now that I'm at Friends Meeting of Washington and they don't have a formal role like Putney does, you're the obvious person. But multiple, yes. I have at different times had people eldering. And like you said, you cannot go to Montclair, New Jersey without a Quaker elder. And so my friend Pamela did that, and that was fantastic. And the Montclair Friends meeting all sat in the front row. There were about 10 of them just beaming at me as people were standing up in the middle of the talk and screaming at me that I wanted to kill all Jewish babies and that I was an anti-Semite. And how could I talk about ceasefire and equality and justice for all? And that was anti-Semitic. So it was, the power of accompaniment is so huge. So I'm glad you're feeling relieved and encouraged on that.
I just thought of a nutshell answer to your question, Kelly. Who do you trust to tell you when you're full of it?
To love you enough to do that.
Yeah.
But also, it's like, I love it when you go, Steve, I felt you really reached people. You were well used today. And that's really important today. And then debrief and to get notes and then to figure out, okay, one of the things I like the continuity is you've been with me many times, but I'm still evolving and it's changing. What are the needs of a particular meeting or group of friends or interfaith thing? And we can, because of that history, we can go, okay, what is needed now? And what worked in the past, but what might you need to do differently for this group of friends? That's just remarkable to have the continuity as well as the flexibility to use multiple people for different things.
Reply on that one too. When
Marcus,
Marcus,
have the thing?
Marcus and I are here from Providence, Rhode Island, and Marcus is the fellow who's been invited to be here, and I came as the other. But at the time that Wendy sent out the form or asked Marcus, well, you need to tell us, who's your elder that you're bringing with you to this conference, and Marcus went around and asked all of us, and everybody was sort of hemmed and hawed for a little while. And Marcus finally went to Wendy and said, Wendy, my care and accountability team are my elders, all of them. Can't I just give you all their names? And my understanding, Wendy, was that Wendy said to Marcus, yeah, that's fine, Marcus, but only one person can come to Pendle Hill. So, and yeah, and we are having an issue back yonder around Marcus's ministry. And we have been on the phone with all of ourselves this week. And we found just the right person to hopefully be dealing with it while we're here. And it's just been delightful to have everybody stepping up. And so, I'm going to dash home on Sunday to a monthly meeting and see if it's all been solved. So it really is a wonderful thing for all of us on care and accountability to be also known as the elders, because we dearly love what Marcus is doing, and and he challenges us and we challenge him, and we work together to get to a place where we're all working the same. So just wanted to say that.
Beautiful.
Anybody on Zoom before we go? Because we're just about at time.
Barbara.
Yeah,
Barbara.
a comment and a question. I first of all just feel so thankful for this session. I have felt I'm a relatively new Quaker, but at Friends Meeting of Washington, I have hearing Steve's stories. I felt for a long time that support for ministries in the world and eldering are both things I would like to see more of. And I know this is not a quick answer, but what can you, and also just thank you so much to Kelly for working on this and Joe. What would be your advice for increasing the level of ministries supported by eldering and, and acknowledged within meetings in any meeting?
Well, this is a great time for a plug for the Friends Incubator for Public Ministry. Yeah, we have glow in the dark stickers here for people who are here. My answer to that would be keep working at it, but also keep grounding it in spirituality, keep grounding it in that first of the three legs of the stool that Steve mentioned, the contemplative spirituality. There are lots of reasons that you could use as arguments for ministers and elders to work together for just one part of your question. And you could say, well, traveling, and you don't want to travel alone, it's practical, blah. But if we keep it conceptualized as a spiritual partnership, I think that's really important for justifying why it really matters to friends.
Yeah, it's the secret sauce.
Yeah. But then the other part of Barbara's question was, how do we get meetings to acknowledge that this is a worthwhile thing? And that's a way harder question to me. But I know what the Friends Incubator is doing is working with pairs of ministers or fellows and elders who are also working within their meeting. So the concept behind this program is not just let's train some ministers and train some elders and then they'll be cool. It's let's acknowledge the challenges that those ministers and elders might have in their meeting and support them. So folks from the Incubator Project have been meeting with the meetings. This week we have the elders and fellows together, but the wider project is to work with the meetings. And right now there are 5 meetings involved in the project, but there are going to be many more. So do you have more to say? If you donate.
Yeah, if you donate. And I think the other thing is that there's sort of a modern bias among some friends of, oh, we can't name somebody who has gifts as a minister, and we can't even name somebody who has gifts as an elder to work together to travel. And my experience at Putney Friends was just amazing. And people used to say, because I had a traveling minute, Noah, who's now general secretary of New England Yearly Meeting, had a traveling minute. And he would sometimes elder for me. I would sometimes elder for him. John Calvy's a member of Putney Friends Meeting. And, people would say, what's in the drinking water in Putney? And what it was our ministry and worship committee just took this so seriously and reached out to people and figured out how they could be of use, and then would involve other people in the meeting as support committee. And I used to be amazed too that people on all of our different support committees said, this is spiritually enriching for me. It's calling me forth. And I don't think I probably would have ever asked you to play the formal role if I hadn't had that, even though there was a couple of years where I felt like, is this too much of a one-way relationship? But you know, it didn't pan out like that. But I think meetings have to get over the sense of, oh, you can't name somebody as a traveling minister on your behalf. But I had a letter, and so I would go and do ministry from 2011 on while I was still involved with Putney. And so clerks of meetings or the clerk of the committee that invited me would comment on the letter, and then I would bring it back to my support committee and they would see how it was going. But in the letter, it says, sort of encouraging them to provide spiritual nurture to me while I was with them. So they were encouraging those meetings to consider their role of eldering me if I didn't have somebody traveling with me. And I just think friends need to get more savvy and spiritually deep and restore the best part of that tradition of companions for traveling ministers in the Religious Society of Friends and in interfaith settings as well. Yeah.
From Joan, Wendy's elder.
I don't know if you can hear me because you had trouble last night. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, good. I'm so gratified to hear of the Friends Meeting of Washington experience and your experience, Steve, of having your eldering and your ministry supported at Putney Friends and New England Yearly Meeting. I come from Friends Meeting of Washington back in the 80s and 90s when my husband and I were doing a couple enrichment ministry. And people did not know how to provide support, including at FMW or in our yearly meeting. And then when we started to do intervisitation at Baltimore Yearly Meeting with Friends United Meeting, our monthly meetings didn't know how to do travel minutes. And this is why I think so engaged with the incubator and Wendy's. This is so needed and has been so needed for such a long time. We've lost it and we are getting it back. And I am so grateful to hear, Steve, that you brought this to FMW and that what Kelly and Joe are doing, because that's near and dear to my heart.
They did that kind of on their own, and I was just delighted hearing about it. I was not involved in the working group that's sort of among.
Yeah, but you're benefiting from it.
Definitely, and benefiting from it. And you'd be pleased to know, Joan, that at interim meeting, I went to the interim meeting recently, and they had a person coming up for the second time to be named by yearly meeting as a traveling minister.
Yes, that was Stuart Green. I was there too. But do you know how long it's been since we've had anybody named? We have a long history. We have a long way to go. Yeah. And I am so pleased about what's happening in the incubator and with all of you. So we're getting there, friends, but it's been a long journey. And I can speak to that from personal experience.
I think one ingredient actually is helping meetings to be aware of the Quaker world beyond their meeting.
Yep.
I keep hearing about meetings where people are amazed to hear that there's such a thing as a yearly meeting or, a Quaker magazine called Friends Journal. And I think the more that we can do to educate meetings that they are not isolated, the more value they might be able to see in this kind of supporting this kind of work.
Yep.
Well, we are at a little over an hour. I'm
Yeah.
guessing we should probably settle into some silent worship and then be grateful that we had this time together and move on with our lives. Thank you, friends.
Thank you for coming, Edie.
Thank you for having me. Everybody have a wonderful night.
Thanks very much.
I'm happy to see 3 people from Southeastern Europe.